Hi, we're just about getting ready to start. I just want to do a quick introduction. My name is Julie Merino Carrela. I am a program coordinator at the Center on Global Energy Policy at Columbia University. And we are super excited to be co-hosting this event with the Rutgers Energy Institute. This is actually the first Women in Energy event being held at Rutgers University. Woo! And a little background of the Women in Energy program. It was piloted at the center, I believe, in 2014, and we received a fund to formalize the program. The aim of the objectives of the program is to increase the number of females in the energy sector, and in the mid to long range, increase the level of mid-level and executive women in the energy field. We have a number of public events, private, smaller events that are only for current female students in the interested in energy. Public events such as this. We have a variety of site visits, leadership development workshops, and like I mentioned before, this is the first public event we're having at Rutgers, hopefully the very first one of many. And with that, I will turn it over to the panel. If you have any questions, I guess you could also shoot me an email. My email is jem2245@columbia.edu. Cool. Thanks.
Thank you, July. And Julie, sorry, I know, like, no. My name is Dr. Rachael Shwom. I'm the Associate Director at the Rutgers Energy Institute and an Associate Professor in the Department of Human Ecology at Rutgers University. And I've been working on energy for over 2 decades now, so I'm thrilled to be here co-hosting the first Women in Energy Rutgers event with the Columbia University Center on Global Energy Policy. We're going to talk, I'll be moderating this event, and we're going to be talking with a set of distinguished experts about their experience as leading women in the energy sector in both academia and the public and nonprofit sectors. And I'll introduce them in a moment. But first, let me quickly say that this event, like all of those events at Columbia University Center on Global Energy Policy, is being webcast live, and both the full video and a podcast recording will be available on our website and iTunes for coming days. And for those of you watching online, as well as people here in the audience, you can ask a question for the panelists at any time using the hashtag CGEP events and the Twitter handle at Columbia U Energy. So I'm going to just introduce the speakers one at a time. I'll kind of give you their bio, and then they're going to speak to you about 7 minutes. And then we'll have a moderated discussion where I'll ask some questions of them. And after about 20 minutes of that, we'll open it up to audience question and answer. And around 7:30, we'll wrap up and let people kind of enjoy the reception a bit. So we're going to start. Our first speaker tonight is Jeanne Fox, kind of in the middle there. And Jeanne, okay, is let me give you this bio. A commissioner of the New Jersey Board of Public Utilities and served as its president and a member of the governor's cabinet from January 2002 to January 2010. Ms. Fox was appointed to the New Jersey BPU on January 15, 2002, and was reconfirmed for a second term in 2009. The BPU has regulatory jurisdiction over telephone, electric, gas, wastewater, and cable television companies, and works to ensure that customers have access to safe, reliable services at reasonable rates. Under President Fox's leadership, the BPU has become a leader among states in developing cutting-edge clean energy policies and promoting renewable energy and energy efficiency. As a result, under her leadership, New Jersey has been second only to California in the number of solar installations. She is also chair of the Electric Power Research Institute's Energy Efficiency and Grid Modernization Public Advisory Group, member of the Harvard Electricity Policy Group, member of the National Petroleum Council, as well as the National Council on Electricity Policy, having served as its chair for 5 years, and many, many other kind of prestigious chairs and honors. Prior to her appointment to the board, Ms. Fox served as regional administrator of the United States Environmental Protection Agency and as commissioner and deputy commissioner of the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection and Energy. And so we're looking forward to her remarks to you all on her career path as a woman and the challenges and opportunities she's had.
We're not going to talk too long about ourselves because we want to get into discussions with you, but I live in New Brunswick. I went to Douglas College, graduated there in '75, went to Rutgers Law School in Camden, graduated in '79, and I've been in government literally my whole career. Even my summer jobs were government jobs. I worked for EPA 2 summers, once at the Fresh and Saltwater Biology Laboratory in Edison, and once as a law clerk in Philadelphia. In 1977, that was a lot of fun. But I'm a member of the Rutgers Board of Trustees. Actually, I'm a trustee emerita. I've been a trustee since 1990, and very active at Rutgers. I'm the president of the Douglas Associate Alumni of Douglas College for the last 3 years. I teach at Columbia as an adjunct faculty member, so this was very cool for me. I've been doing that. This will be my 4th spring. I do a capstone workshop in an energy environment arena at the School of International Public Affairs, and I have a great time, and there's only 5 to 8 students, and it's really a lot of fun. So I'm thrilled that Rutgers and Columbia are working on this together. It makes a lot of sense. Both universities do have women in energy programs, but it's good to be able to share this type of information together. I'm probably the oldest on the panel, and so I graduated law school in '79, and I wanted to be in government. I started at I won't go through the first couple things, I couldn't get a government job at that time, but during the summer I worked as a student 3 summers at the post office, where you got paid a lot of money, but 2 summers at EPA, a summer at Department of Higher Education, a summer at the Utility Commission as a law clerk, and a couple other places like that, but all government. I started the Board of Public Utilities in '79 and '81 as a lawyer. 15 lawyers, I was the only woman. Only the 3rd woman in the history of the agencies that started in 1911. It's the 3rd woman attorney. It was one at a time, so I was the 3rd one. And at that point in time, there was only the 2nd woman commissioner. We're talking 3 commissioners at a time, bipartisan 6-year term since 1911. In 1981, there was only the 2nd woman who was commissioner. She became president of the agency in '82, and I was the only woman, again, an attorney, did really good stuff for them, I could write at the time, and was promoted by her to deputy director of the solid waste division. Anybody want to talk about the mafia and solid waste, I could talk to you about that. In 1987, this is civil service. In 1987, I became director of the water and sewer division. She had appointed another woman director of the gas division and made me the director of the water and sewer division. I note that I'm a very active Democrat, was an active Democrat then. This was a Republican woman commissioner president, and she promoted me because she said I did a good job. It was relevant when I do it on my own time. I've practiced that since. Went to the Department of Environmental Protection back in 1991, at the beginning, as the deputy commissioner. The guy who was president of BPU took me with him. I was his chief of staff. I didn't know the guy, by the way, and I wrote him a memo when he came to the Utility Commission about how do we organize the agency, and he made me his chief of staff. He then, a year later, took me to DEP. When he went to be the governor's counselor for Governor Florio back a long time ago, I became the commissioner of DEP. Then I went to EPA because Florio lost to Christy Todd Whitman, first woman governor, only woman governor so far in New Jersey, who had been president of the Board of Public Utilities when I was director of the Water and Sewer Division. So I knew her well. She was a very good commissioner and chair. She would change her mind on facts. I mean, she was really very solid. I actually started to join the Women's Political Caucus, which then endorsed her against my boss, Jim Florio, in 1993 for governor. She beat him. So I went to EPA under Bill Clinton, as the regional administrator of Region 2, which is New York, New Jersey, Puerto Rico, and the U.S. Virgin Islands, and I really feel sorry for my friends in Puerto Rico. Great job, probably the best job I ever had, other than carrying mail in Wildwood, and 1,000 people in the region at the time. I wear my pin because EPA is getting a raw deal, as you all know, worse than any other agency in the government, and it's a great organization. Was there for 7 years and then worked on Jim McGreevy's campaign doing energy, environment, women, and higher education. got him the endorsements of women's groups and of the environmental groups, which was not easy, and got to be the president of the Utility Commission, which I had worked for 10 years before. I wanted to do that because of climate change when I was in EPA. I mean, we worked on it in the early 90s under Florio because people knew it was happening. And in fact, Florio had made it the Department of Environmental Protection and Energy, but Whitman changed it back. But Al Gore's people educated the 10 regional administrators about climate change scared the bejesus out of me. This is like 1995. And so even though I'm now 65, I'm still working in this area because everybody's got to do their own small part. And so for you in the room interested in this stuff, anything you want to do in the climate change area, do your role, whether it's in private research, whether it's in public office, whether it's doing technology and being an engineer and creating new initiatives and a new technology. You got to do it because it's for you and your children, and we all know it's getting worse. I only want to say one more thing. It's pretty clear back in the old day when I was your age that there weren't many women in these professional positions, and most of the women in professional positions so really didn't want to let the women around, as supposedly what was said. And there weren't any women. I probably would have been an architect if I was allowed to take courses that I wasn't allowed to take in junior high school and high school. So things are a lot better for women, but there are still clearly either conscious or subconscious biases out there. Now, when you're a student, you think you're equal. You're not equal. I taught a course at Rutgers. I taught political science courses for senior seminars last year, fall and spring, in all senior seminars. The senior seminar in the fall last year was Gender in the 2016 Election. All 19 students, none of them voted for Hillary in the primary. 15 of them voted for Bernie, and 4 of them, 2 Republicans didn't vote, and 1 voted for Bush and 1 for Kasich. But all 19 of them voted for Hillary. But out of the 19 Rutgers senior science political majors, only 2 of the 19 knew that women weren't equal under the Constitution, which is a scary thing. So I'm going to stop there. I look forward to discussions and questions, but I urge you to get involved. It's much easier, not easy, but much easier for women in this arena now.
Thank you, Jeanne. We're going to move on to Serpil Guran's comments. Serpil is the director of the Rutgers EcoComplex. Her responsibilities include management of the EcoComplex operations, programs, business incubator, and facilities, as well as providing vision and leadership, establishing the EcoComplex as a nationally recognized center for the commercialization of environmental and alternative energy technologies. Additionally, Dr. Guran serves as liaison to the regional environmental and alternative energy business communities, government agencies, and related organizations. Dr. Guran was formerly a research scientist at the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection for 13 years, most recently with the Office of Economic Growth and Green Energy. Prior to that, she was a research scientist at Princeton University in the Mechanical Aerospace Engineering Department and at the National Renewable Energy Laboratory in Golden, Colorado. Dr. Guran specializes in research, development, and assessment of sustainable biofuel and recycling technologies and life cycle analysis of alternative fuel production systems. She has authored more than 25 scientific articles and holds a U.S. patent and patent disclosure. Dr. Guran has an MS in chemical engineering from, Anadolu University in Turkey, and a PhD in chemical engineering with a specialization in fuel and energy technology from the University of Leeds in the UK. So please. Yes.
Rachel, thank you. Well, good evening, and thank you for inviting Rutgers Energy Institute and Columbia CGEP, and I have a different background than Jeanne, and yes, I come from Turkey, and I went to United Kingdom after chemical engineering, studying chemical engineering. I went to UK to do my PhD, and especially working on solid waste, and also it's all also energy and also environment related matters, how to convert solid waste and also especially biomass into clean energy and also fuels. And so, and then I was invited, yeah, I can say that, I'm an immigrant, but invited immigrant, to National Renewable Energy Lab as a postdoc. And that postdocship opened further doors. And so now, and then they offered my green card, and so it was wonderful. And so, and then I ended up in New Jersey. That time it was interesting, and my background is all combustion, thermochemical conversion technologies. I'm talking about early 90s. And New Jersey was, interestingly, the industry is all pharmaceuticals, mostly, except a couple of petroleum refineries, but somehow, anyway, after doing certain postdoc research also at Princeton University, I ended up at Department of Environmental Protection and started wearing environmentalist hat. In addition to energy hats. And so, you know, I moved from department to department, but mostly all doing research scientists and supplying correct data to decision makers. That's how I believe that decision makers should do, you know, should make their decisions on correct information and data. So then another opportunity appeared, and I moved to Rutgers University in 2011, and they have a EcoComplex. It's an off-campus, how would you say, as like, because Rutgers University is a land-grant university, it has extension centers, outlying extension centers. Originally, that center was formed as Environmental and Agricultural Extension Center. However, you can appreciate that neither environmental matters nor agricultural matters cannot be separated from energy matters. So I started promoting this center as a clean energy center. And also now, currently, we're trying to convert the center and promote the center also food, energy, water, nexus living laboratory also, because we believe in that, again, environment, food matters, agriculture, and energy matters cannot be separated. In addition to what Rachael provided, also I teach critical thinking, introduction to bioenergy technologies, and also sustainability decision tools, and partnering with another professor from Department of Agricultural Research program. This is, you know, so exciting event for me because not only, you know, women in energy, but also coming from different country. And so I'd like to bring that perspective to you. If, you know, coming from different backgrounds is important. And so you have to be strong woman, but also you have to be strong, you know, keep your territory, and so try to achieve, you know, barriers and additional barriers. So I'm going to stop here, and so we'll continue later. Mm-hmm.
Thank you very much, Serpil. Mm-hmm. So next we'll turn this over after bio to Ellen Morris, and she's at the School of Public and International Affairs in Columbia, and Ellen is also the president and founder of Sustainable, maybe I should move this back over here, president and founder of Sustainable Energy Solutions, a consulting services company that promotes the increased use and deployment of clean energy technologies and services as a means to support economic development and reduce poverty in developing countries. She is currently a founding partner of a new social enterprise called Embark Energy that is focused on radically increasing the scale of energy access by empowering thousands of clean energy entrepreneurs in low-income countries. Their mission is to create clean energy enterprises by using a web-based portal that is centered on experiential learning, business coaching, supply chain management, links to financing, and access to high-quality energy products. In 2007, Ellen was co-founder of ARC Finance, an organization that promotes and expands access to end-user finance for modern energy. Since 1996, Ellen has been a senior consultant for the United Nations Development Program on Sustainable Energy, where her work focuses on technical and programmatic support for countries seeking to advance energy as a means for poverty reduction and enterprise development. Ellen started her career in clean energy, working for the National Renewable Energy Laboratory, so you guys could have been there. And the early part of her career, she worked as a science advisor to the U.S. Congress and as an exploration geophysicist for Texaco. And I'll let her tell you the rest about herself.
Thanks for that. I think my career path is a testament to never leaving a door unopened. And I always tell my students at Columbia, when you see opportunities and you are thinking about your own, what you've studied. I studied geophysical engineering, and then I got a PhD in marine geophysics. And now I'm working in public policy at Columbia, and also working in sub-Saharan Africa on energy and development. So I always say, never rule things out, and if things look interesting, regardless of what you studied, you can take that opportunity. And I think Jeanne was a really good example of that as well. So I started my studies really on the science side and studied engineering at a school called Colorado School of Mines, which is in Golden, Colorado. And when I went there, there were 7% women. So it was a very, normal thing, having studied science and math in high school. And but when you go to Colorado School of Mines, you really feel that isolation as a woman. And I was just looking through my stuff in my garage. We had someone from the School of Mines come to New Jersey, to where I live, to talk about support with getting new students into School of Mines. And in my garage, I found this button. And it's, Colorado School of Mines, and it had cute, sexy miner, and then CSM. And I was like,
That's your button.
that was the button you were given as a freshman. And I showed it to the guy who's working in, alumni affairs in Golden, Colorado. He was like, oh my God, I can't even show this button in my office, or I'll be like fired immediately. But that was the culture. It was very much a male-dominated field, obviously mining, all the extractive industries. It was very focused on the oil and gas business. And so everyone in School of Mines usually went to mining companies, oil and gas companies, no renewables, no nothing. And I think in the School of Mines curriculum, which is all engineering, you took 4 humanities classes. And I know it hasn't changed much in engineering, but it's a little bit better, I think, now. So when I graduated, I went to work for Texaco in California doing exploration geophysics. And living in Los Angeles was awesome, and I got a lot of great field experience doing offshore exploration, taking helicopters out to rigs, sitting on rigs in, Central California. Always definitely the only woman, because it's just, that's the way the oil and gas business, I think, still is pretty much. But I'll never forget, as a young person, being the on-site geophysicist out on an offshore rig, offshore California, and took the helicopter out there, got out there, and they have, you have to stay out there for like 2 weeks. And, this old guy, who's been in the field for a long time, came up to me like during the dinner hour and said, like, why are you out here? What are you doing out here? We don't need women out here to tell us what to do. And I was like, I was, 20, whatever, 3 years old, and I said, I'm just here as the representative for Texaco doing my job, and I was made sure like my door locked, and it was really just like too much. I couldn't really believe it, because up until then I had always been in this culture, and I'm sure it's the same here at Rutgers. At a university setting, you feel like you're in a class, you do your work, and you get your grades, and it's good. But in that work environment, it was a quite different scenario, and it was very much an old school kind of guy, but I'm sure the younger people were the same as well. So then I went off to get my PhD at University of Rhode Island in oceanography, which was a really great, experiential. Did a lot of field work as a grad student. And when I was ready to graduate, or a year from graduating, I was recruited by ExxonMobil. And so I had this job offer sitting from ExxonMobil. And then I decided to think about this public policy fellowship, which allowed scientists to work in public policy in Washington, D.C. And it's a very interesting program because it brings people mainly in PhD programs who are studying in the sciences and math to go work as an advisor in places like EPA, NOAA, the president's office, and Congress. And so I ended up getting a spot in the House of Representatives Science, Space, and Technology Committee. And there was an Energy and Environment Subcommittee. So I was with the Energy and Environment Subcommittee, and I was placed as the resident, oceans person, geophysics, geothermal, whatever came my way. And it was just so awesome to see how you could use your technical skills in something in such an applied and interesting way. And at that point, the Congress was not so toxic as it is now. People were definitely working across the aisle to pass, the Energy Policy Act and other very important things. And most importantly, I had a mentor there who was a woman who had been at Department of Energy forever. And then she had taken a secondment, or been a sort of assigned to this subcommittee. So she was already a senior professional. And, I just watched her and I just said, she really knows her stuff. She's so respected. She gets it. And I said, Tina is really my model. And so when it came time, my year-long fellowship was done because ExxonMobil put my job offer on hold. I sort of had to say, I'm thinking of not coming to work at ExxonMobil in Houston, because when I was at the Environment Subcommittee, the other thing we worked on was renewable energy legislation, because you can imagine that as the Energy Policy Act was being passed, a key part of that was renewable energy or clean energy. So I had to really that was a huge fork in the road for me. I did not look back. I never went back to the oil and gas business, and I've been in clean energy ever since. And that time sort of working at the policy level also made me realize that, policy at the national level or at the international level is very interesting. And then just because of personal reasons, my husband was living in New York, I decided to move to New York. So but in the meantime, I had worked for National Renewable Energy Laboratory in Washington, D.C. on clean energy legislation. So it's a technical research lab, which is based in Golden, Colorado, but they also had a policy office in D.C. So circumstances, again, personal circumstances can't be forgotten when you're trying to make job decisions. And I think sometimes students lose sight of that. I just had a student the other day who was like, well, my wife lives here and I'm going to live here and we're going to make it work and it's in another state or country. I was like, don't do that. That's ridiculous. Find a job in the same place. You're married. You don't want to be separated. So you make choices, and it sometimes goes either way with your partner. Anyway, so I moved to New York, and when I moved to New York, no one was doing clean energy at that point except for the United Nations and Natural Resources Defense Council was a nonprofit that I knew. Anyway, so I went to the UN and the UNDP, and I somehow got a connection through Department of Energy, an introduction. So I went in for the meeting just to get an informational meeting and say, look, I know about clean energy, I know about policy, and I knew UN did that. I walked in and they said, oh, well, we have this project and we don't have anyone to help us finish it, and it's due in a month. Can you start on Monday? And I was like, yes, I can start on Monday. So I was like, awesome. So that led to I'm still engaged with the UN as a sort of outside insider, and but it was that moment of just being, as you sort of just have to be super opportunistic, and it has nothing to do with being a man or a woman, but just being there, making the decision, going, I'm good. And so when I got that experience with the UNDP, it really opened my eyes to the other part of the world, which we call the rest of the world, that doesn't have access to electricity, clean cooking fuels, any kind of motive power for automating, grinding, and milling and husking of agricultural products in lots of the world. So 1.3 billion people don't have access to electricity. 2.4 billion people are cooking on traditional fuels. And that sort of launched me into this whole other sector that has really driven my career for the last 20 years. And so now I really work on emerging economies, very poor, difficult, far, remote places, trying to design energy systems that are appropriate for people who have very little money, very focused on gender issues because women bear the brunt of mostly not having access to energy. So I do a lot of work on gender policies and gender and energy policies, which remarkably are sort of similar to what's happening in this country. You don't see too much difference in the main issues that happen in a workforce, in how women are treated, pay gap, access to what you do with a technical degree, having access to a technical degree, all of those things. So there's a lot of parallels between developing countries and North America and Europe. So that's what I spend a lot of my time doing now. And I also teach at SIPA, School of International Public Affairs. And yeah, I'm always happy to help young people who are thinking about getting into this field, because I agree with Jeanne. This is the time to do it. It's awesome, whatever you do, whether it's what Jeanne does or what I do. And now is the time to really seize the moment. And because there's a huge world out there without access to any energy, let alone this kind of energy. And if that's what you're interested in, definitely follow up with me.
Thank you so much, Ellen. Okay, so we're to our last speaker, Professor Alissa Park, and she is the Lenfest Chair in Applied Climate Science at Columbia University and is also director of the Lenfest Center for Sustainable Energy, where she researches issues in energy, environmental engineering, and particle technology. Some of Dr. Park's areas of research interest are carbon capture, utilization and storage, sustainable energy conversion systems, synthesis of hydrogen in liquid fuels from alternative energy sources, particle technology, electrostatic charging phenomena in multi-phase flows, and electrostatic tomography. She has recently received numerous honors and distinctions throughout her career as a researcher, recently being appointed as a member of the International Committee at the American Institute of Chemical Engineers, where she has also been elected as the vice chair in 2009 to 2011 and as the chair in 2011 to 2013 of the Fluidization and Fluid Particle Systems Group, and treasurer from 2010 to 2015 of the Particle Technology Forum. She has received the James Lee Young Investigator Award, the NSF Career Award, and a nomination for the Packard Fellowship. In 2011, she was the distinguished speaker at the Women's Sphere Emerging Leaders Global Summit. And as a graduate of the University of British Columbia, Professor Park received a Bachelor of Applied Science with distinction and a Master of Applied Science, both in chemical and biological engineering, and then a PhD degree in chemical and biomolecular engineering from Ohio State University. So please go ahead.
Hello? Is it okay? Oh, that's work. I was just listening to three amazing ladies, and my career is still slightly shorter. I thought it was a lot more straightforward. I thought it was more straightforward, and I guess I've done a little bit, I guess, based on what you said. I did much straighter path in my career, I guess, because I did undergrad, master's, and PhD, and became faculty in one line. I didn't deviate too much, I guess. Or in chemical engineering. Let's see. When I was doing my master's research, I really got interested in physics of chemical reactors. So most of my research is looking at how to design fluidized bed reactors and for polymer synthesis. And that was about the time people started looking into environmental issues and a lot of bio in chemical engineering. And I never liked biochemistry, so that's ruled out. And then I never thought I would like environmental issues. I thought, I want to make my own messes. I don't want to clean up somebody else's. And then when I went to PhD, my advisor looked at me and go, in the future, we're not going to be really focusing on just fundamentals. And I think when you go to grad school, you realize that the thesis title 20 years ago versus now, very different. It was very fundamentally driven 20 years ago. I think now if I try to say we're going to look at the surface reaction rates on heterogeneous materials or something, nobody will come. But if I say I'm going to do carbon capture and storage, I have whole lines of students. I think era has changed. The way students get motivated is changed. I think that's what is reflected. And when I was doing starting my PhD, my advisor looked at me and said, future is, he didn't say the word sustainability, but that's what he was alluding to. Because we cannot just optimize the best conversion, lowest cost, and high selectivity, but also we need to look at the system boundary a little bigger and looking at what does it mean to the environment. Can we optimize the environmental sustainability at the time? And that led to carbon sequestration project as my PhD thesis. So when I graduated, I think I made a kind of interesting decisions, although it was a kind of linear path, was that everybody thought I should go to a highest ranked school, worked on what everybody else has worked on, like a biomedical side of the chemical engineering. I never liked it. I always liked being unique. I wanted to do what I like to do. I didn't really care what other people did, because at the end of the day, I'm the one working with that, not other people. So by the time I graduated, I was basically only one in my age group really looking at the sustainability of the energy sector. So when I looked for faculty position, I think I was most highly sought after, just because they already saturated biofield in chemical engineering, and they didn't know what to do because they gotta have diverse portfolio. So that kind of carried over throughout entire my career, last 11 years at Columbia, because I'm at the front of the generation looking into this. If you look at energy sector now in the United States, I'm sure academia, industry similar, there's a huge gender gap, as they mentioned, but there's also a huge generation gap. So I remember when I arrived in academia, all my friends who did the bio-based research, they have a stack of people on every single step, so they move very slowly, little by little, right? And when I arrived, I was looked up, and there was no one between me and the person age 60 plus, and I didn't know what to do. I looked, and they looked down at me and go, "Oh my gosh, there's a young thing just arrived." Good, right? So instead of taking each step, I got the escalator up really fast. There are pros and cons, I think. Opportunities are great. Visibility is strong. You'll be on panels from the day one. I was put into Shark Tank every day. At the same time, if you fail, it's a highly visible failure. So I think now I look back, I was young and stupid enough not to feel the fear at the time, but now looking back, it could have been great disaster. But I think it has been very interesting. I got a lot of phone calls, even in my generation. It's kind of funny because in my undergrad, there were 40% female in chemical engineering. Graduate school, about 30%. And when I got to the faculty level, in earth and environmental engineering, I'm appointed between earth and environmental and chemical engineering. I'm one and only female faculty member last 11 years in earth and environmental. Chemical engineering, one of the three. So still we are extremely... most of the engineering departments at Columbia is small, so 15 to 20 each department, small, but still the fact that in earth and environmental engineering, our undergrad population is 70% female, and I'm the only one, so the mix-up doesn't really match. I think there are still a lot of issues. I get a lot of interesting comments. For example, they will make a public speech, and they're trying to say something nice about me, I think. They're saying that, well, getting a Department of Energy research funding in large multi-million level is almost impossible unless you smile like Alissa. So things like that still happens today. So
By a fellow faculty member.
Yes. Mm-hmm. And they didn't mean anything wrong by it. Sure. So it's kind of interesting journey. I think we're still battering these things, but at the same time, there are enough of us out there. So I think it would be really good to share the knowledge. Thank you.
Thank you all so much. So now we have, we'll probably adjust the time, but probably have about 20 minutes of kind of moderated discussion. I've come up with a couple of questions to kick off the discussion, and then we'll turn it over to our audience. But I wanted to ask you, and thank you so much for kind of sharing these really diverse and rich career pathways and experiences. And I guess I wanted to ask you, as these wonderful, I see many graduate students and undergraduates and some faculty, are getting ready to go out, and they'll surely have their pick of employers, and hopefully, and so I guess I would ask them, based on your experience, what would you say are things they should look for and evaluate from potential employers as far as being supportive of women, or red flags where it might be a terrible time, and any kinds of workplace policies that you would want to see in place that that they should be looking for, or kind of just other signs that you think they should be looking for in future employers?
I guess, I mean, I always work in a very just virtual world sometimes, because most of the people I work with are in sub-Saharan Africa or in South Asia. So for me, the workplace is this global collaboration, sort of. And so when I look at workplaces, I look at places where I mean, I don't know how you figure this out before you actually start working, but for me, and me personally, I always like working with people who are smarter than me, and that I can recognize that. I think bosses that think they know everything are the worst. Yeah. And so for me, a lot of people assume that people living and working in Africa are not as smart as them because they don't have the same level of education, or they don't have the same things that we have here that we take for granted, you know, graduate, undergraduate, graduate, and whatever degree, or access to money or things. But what I always find is that you learn the most from people who have the least in some ways, and they come up with some very creative engineering designs, business models, whatever it may be. And for me, it's about someone, a boss, an environment that allows you to recognize that and embrace it. And not, for me, if I were to go into a place and pretend that I knew everything about rural Ghana or rural Senegal, I would be just wrong. I mean, there's so much innovation happening in these places, and you have to just go in with the mindset of someone's going to teach me something very interesting that's really going to change the world. So looking for a work environment like that there's nothing better than that. A boss who isn't threatened by you being like smart, because I know young people just have the most amazing ideas, and you know, it always works out super well to recognize they're smarter than I am. These people in these countries, these people in my classes, they're very, very smart. And how do you tap into that? And yeah, they need channeling and this and that and guidance, and it all seems to work out. But that would be my sort of, if you're looking for a workplace, trying to suss that out in the interview process.
You would like to go
Yeah, you get
last?
the benefit.
Alissa, okay. All right. Well, I did not work private. I worked at the private companies, okay, and I worked a federal government, state government, and academia. It's my, you know, changing, diverting my career path. It always involved with government, working with government, and. But you have to, when you're changing or looking for your career path, if I understood the question correctly, you should really choose, even working for government, you can choose the departments. You can choose at least you can make available yourself for certain projects, as Ellen mentioned, and sometimes, they look for certain projects who would do it, and being there available, and it's really important for you to, yes, anyone, without gender difference, it's important, but as women, it's more important. Be there, be available. And then, obviously, the project, if you don't like it, obviously, you won't be creating good results. So try to choose something that you like. This is really important. And also, always still speak a little louder and show yourself. It's important. And especially as women, okay? And you have to speak loud, and so not that shout, I don't mean that, but speak louder and be noticeable, and that's important. Did I do that? Well, that's questionable. However, but I am seeing that successful women do that, and and choosing right topics. Obviously, you have to be lucky to choose, get good teams and above you, and working for you also. The teams are important, and always be a good team member. And while you're working in the energy also, and also environment, be a good team member and be supportive. And as they said, no one knows everything well. And always value others' opinions, and especially, decision-making positions, and also providing information. So, more to say, but, go ahead, I don't want to take more.
So as I mentioned, I've been in academia all my life, never worked in the real industry, so I guess I cannot really speak much about that. But I do have my students, PhD student or even undergrad student, gone into academic jobs as well as industrial jobs. First thing I always tell them, even when I first meet them, first day of graduate school or PhD, say, what do you want to be? Right? What do you want to be after you graduate? Because some people really focus on, can I finish my PhD in 4 years? Can I finish PhD 5 years? That's the first thing they will ask. That's a wrong question to ask. When you think about living, I don't know, right now, pushing almost 100 years, right, in your generation, 1 year in your life, it goes into noise very quickly. It really doesn't mean anything. 1 year graduating earlier or later, what you graduate with is a lot more important. So do the source searching earlier. It does not mean what you source search today gonna be set in stone and you can't change. No, you can always change. And as you heard from all these ladies, that we do change careers or move jobs all the time. Nobody gonna have a single job entire their life. It will be very difficult to do that so in your generation. So thinking that open as many doors as possible, but do source searching quite often, because I think job, regardless of whether you're in academia or industry, hard part is humans. Human relationship is very tough. Not having a supportive boss or having juniors who doesn't work well with you or colleagues. And I think if you love what you do and you really believe in it at that moment, I think you can be happy about that. And some students ask me how to balance your work, home, and all that stuff. When I was a grad student, I had none, because that's how I chose to be. Does not mean that's the right way to do it, but there's always time in your life you want to do certain things. You shouldn't be judged by taking either path. And I think if you feel strongly about and confident about how you feel, you'll be okay.
I agree with everything these three women have said. I think it is most important, what do you want to do? What do you see yourself in 5 years, 10 years? They're kind of questions you get. But the work is important, so what are you going to do there? Are you going to be interested in it or not? I think when I consult people with young or older who are looking for jobs, and right now I'm involved, we can talk about it later, but the governor's race and the new transition coming in, advising some of the young women who worked in this campaign for Phil Murphy, what should they do? Governor's office, a department, I mean, what should they do? And the issue is, in large part, who will your boss be? You think of the areas that you're interested in, but then who will your boss be? The boss is critical. I was lucky that the chief counsel at the utility commission, when I was there, again, the only woman, I came up with, there were things the commissioners wanted to do policy-wise for the public, but the lawyers, the attorney general's office, and the chief counsel and his people thought you couldn't do it. I thought it was a gray area. I researched it, I did a memo. The commissioners bought it, or the majority of the commissioners bought it. 2 cases in those 5 years went to the state Supreme Court. We won both of them because of the research I did. But my chief counsel let me do that. Other chief counsel would say, no, no, we're not going to do it. I'm the decision maker. He was chief counsel for a long time and he let me do that. And it happened also with commissioners who were my bosses, that kind of thing, and governors that I've served. You want a boss who lets you have opportunities that will give you credit, who are not dictators or command and control types, and believe me, they're still there. Rutgers has a few, but I'm not going to talk about them. You want somebody who's a consensus builder, and at times, I'm a consensus builder, and I want pushback from my staff. A lot of bosses will say they want that, but they don't really. So you need to ask around about that, about people. You want somebody who will listen to everybody, and then if they decide against you, based on the facts, explain to you why. But who that boss is critical. They need to be able to give you, and you ask around on that. I mean, that's just really important. So you also want to be able to have opportunities to do other things, and not just do this narrow, if you come up with something and let you do it in addition to what you're doing. So it's really important who you're working for in an area that you have an interest. And I think that's critical. You really need to figure out who that boss will be. You might want to take another job, not quite the area that you want, because that person has a much better reputation for working with people.
Thank you all. So I'll ask one more question, and then we'll throw it out to the audience. So it's been clear from recent news on the media, from Harvey Weinstein to Roger Ailes to NPR newsroom chiefs, Michael Oreskes, that difficulties for women in the workplace are alive and well, and surely exist across all kinds of workplaces, including energy. And but one thing that's become apparent, at least to many, is the culture of kind of letting it happen, and many knowing and not acting, or many knowing that women are struggling and not acting to change the workplace. And so I was wondering, what are some of the things that people have done to help you or supported you when you've had a barrier, or if they didn't, what is something that somebody could have done to help you, or you would have liked to have seen as you were kind of encountering challenges in the workplace?
Well, I guess, again, I worked for government all my life, and these are interesting times, actually, what in the news, and so as I am also noticing surprising if Me Too kind of movement is going on, and in government, at least I did not notice myself and so experience anything. However, coming from Middle East, and so it's an interesting story. Okay, sometimes I am trying to remember when I was first TA at a college chemical engineering department. Maybe a professor coming and putting his hand on my shoulder. That time, maybe I thought that was a fatherly figure. But now, thinking now here, maybe was it an harassment? I am questioning now that, because I'm learning also, because I'm coming from a different culture, okay? And coming from Middle East, I went to college in late 70s first. So interestingly now, I started questioning, in the lab, your professor comes and puts what's going on, and so interesting. So keeping the territory, maybe that's why that's important. I kind of like living in the West. It's very important, and so I learned a lot, over the years. Did I receive any further harassment? No, I did not. But even now, I am questioning maybe that close encounter. And however, being mentor and mentee is so important in the workplace, and including this kind of certain things. But so creating a mentor-mentee relationship, especially with whoever you think that you can trust, it's important. So that's all I could say.
Yeah, you're hoping that I shouldn't have gone through any of that, right? Because I'm a lot younger for sure, and been in the workplace only 11 years. But I think it didn't change much. I'm sorry, but even at Columbia, not like harassment, but like without saying details, there will be people following you to the hotel rooms when you go to conferences. These things happen routinely. The surprising part, like so colleagues and seniors, these happen all the time. But the most surprising one when I got to Columbia was a student harassing you. I didn't know what to do, really, because I'm the professor.
One of your students?
Not my student, but somebody else's PhD student. Yeah. I didn't know what to do, because I felt that I'm the one who's supposed to have a power, and this person who's a PhD student doesn't supposed not do this to me. But I remember I was a very eager assistant professor working in the office until midnight, and he would come in. He was a very big guy, and then 10, 11 p.m. closed the door behind himself, and he said, let me tell you how to run your research group and all that. He was continuously saying that I should get married. It's not good for ladies not to get married. I'm like, what era are we living in? And he's young, like about my age. I think the issue was he hate to talk about culture thing, but in Asian culture, when ages are similar, because I was just fresh out of grad school, and it wasn't easy for them to accept that female faculty member can be above them, right? So I got a lot of that, and that I had a hard time dealing with because I thought that I'm the one who has more power. If I do something about this, what would happen to this student's life? And already I tried to make a sugarcoat it so that I can kind of, or if I suffer, then everything will go away. Now I look back after 10 years, it wasn't a right move. I shouldn't have done that. But at the time, I didn't have any female faculty members in the department. I really felt bad the fact that it was a student who's struggling with his PhD. So this should not have justified his actions, but I did. So now I'm sure that he didn't learn his lesson, so he might be doing it to other people in his workplace. I don't know. And that kind of one of the regrets that I did not work on it. But there are a lot of things that does happen, and that's why it's good to have mentors. But at Columbia, we do take this very seriously. So we go through training after training, and I also tell all my female students to speak up. But people usually don't because they get confused. But if there's any even single doubt, you have to speak up. And I think this is the lesson you learn from my mistake, is that it's not only about you, it's about the whole community. So if you don't speak up, this will continue. So we need to do something.
And I think Rutgers has been doing, I think, a pretty decent job on this, and I know Columbia does. In my life, I have never had any kind of sexual harassment at all. I think it was because once I was a tomboy. I was a jock in high school, junior high school. I have 4 brothers. I always had a boyfriend, and I was just a guy. And I feel badly, but my best friend from like kindergarten up through high school, I said she would like do things like a girl. So I was always kind of fell with the guys. I got some, when I was a law clerk at the Utility Commission, and there were 12 of us, I was the only female. They would all go out, play foosball, and leave me in the library, and that kind of thing. But that wasn't good, but so what? I've had a lot of experience, and I never had women mentors because there weren't any back then, except for my mother, who was very active in volunteer activities and stuff. But I did have men who were mentors. So Ed Blaustein, who was the president of Rutgers back when I was a student, the best one we've had in my lifetime, taught me when I was 21, 22, a student of the Board of Governors, and then to the Board of Trustees, that you could fight like hell about issues of substance, but still be good friends. So he used to go drinking with the Douglas students. I used to take him drinking. He was great. And I did some things that was against what he wanted, and I beat him at a couple of big things, but he didn't take it personally. So, I mean, he was a mentor of mine, probably my most important mentor in my life. But in my career, I've had a lot of women talk to me about things that have happened to them. If I'm the president of the board or the head of the EPA region or whatever. In government, there are ways to deal with it. And certainly as a person of power, even when I was a director, I could deal with it. There are ways of dealing with that because you have those resources in federal and in state government. Most big companies also have those resources. And today, because especially what's been going on for the last year or so, I think all companies are very much aware of it. I think you really need to deal with it right away. It's all according who it is. And if you have a decent relationship with this person as a boss or as a supervisor or something, you could probably talk to him and say, look, I'm going to have to say something about this if they continue. They'll probably apologize and it will happen again, because that's some advice I've given to some people. But officially, you're supposed to notify whoever that person is in your agency, and it will be handled. If you're nervous about that, reach out to somebody else. There are a lot of people who can give guidance to you on these things, but as you can't let it happen to you, because for every instance that's going on, from some people we won't talk about who are in Washington now, all the way up to the recent events, it's not just one person. There's a lot of people. And so you have to always say, what is my responsibility as a human being to other women? And you really need to do something about it. If it's something minor, like maybe and it's a boss or something, you're just like, tell them, hey, you know, you're not supposed to be doing that, and just stop it, or else I'm going to have to do it. You don't want to go to war over it. But if it's anything that's really serious, you really need to do something about it right away and go over their head or go to the appropriate person.
Yeah, I also don't have any real direct experience about harassment, but I guess in my line of work, I see so many different cultures, and what my career has made me mindful of is to never assume the way I do things is the way everyone does things, or the way I communicate is the way other people communicate. And so when you're working across, you know, Malawi, Senegal, Ghana, Mali, you have to sort of just put yourself in that position of I'm the outsider and I'm trying to do my job here, and this is the cultural context of how things are done, you know, in a business environment, and just never to communicate in a way that is, you know, seemingly, you know, normal maybe, but it's a very harsh, or it's using colloquial expressions that have no meaning or can be interpreted in a weird way in another language. And so that's my experience, is sort of just to make sure that, you know, even in Colombia, there's so many international students. I remember there was a class I was teaching, and, you know, it was a small class, and participation was required. And this woman would never raise her hand. And so I would call on her, and she'd very meekly say a couple of things. And, you know, I was really worried about her because her grade on participation was going to be really suffering. So then she came up to me one day after class, and she says, "Professor Morris, I just want to tell you that I'm not used to speaking out in class because I'm from Myanmar. And if you speak out in class or speak out and give your opinion, you get arrested. It's a really bad thing." So she says, in my culture, I can't speak publicly like you expect us to do in New York City in a class at Columbia University. And I was like, whoa, you know, it was a total wake-up call for me. Like, I never even thought of that. I was just, you know, okay, this is our rubric, how we grade, and it was just so humbling for me, and I just felt so terrible after that, and it made me really think differently about, you know, international students, international colleagues, the whole deal. And that's the good thing about working at the United Nations, is it puts you in that mind every single day, every project you do, every team you are on, everyone comes from somewhere else. And so it's important, you know, whether you put your arm around someone. I mean, someone from Turkey finds that very offensive, and, you know, you wouldn't do that. And so that's my 2 cents on that.
Okay. Good evening, ladies. My name is Damaris Isalis. I'm a Rutgers alumni. Congratulations, and thank you for opening the doors to all of us. And the reason my major has nothing to do with energy or engineering or anything like that. The only reason why I found it interesting is because my family in Puerto Rico still has no power. And whatever is going on is just not working, aside from the political and whatever else is going on. So my question is to whoever can answer it. If you were given the opportunity to work on this project, what would be the first thing you would do?
Puerto Rico?
Yes.
I've been talking to people about that. Puerto Rico was one in my region, and actually, the guy who was the director of our Puerto Rican office, the Caribbean office actually, because we had Virgin Islands, Carlos Soderberg, was up here. I had lunch with him Friday a week ago, so a week and a half ago. His wife told him to stay up here. They have one son in Puerto Rico with the wife who's in college. They have the other son in Queens who's working in New York. He's staying with his son because while they were lucky they had water, they still don't have electricity. He went to a conference in Mexico. He came back to New York instead of going back home. It is horrible. And I worked with PREPA and PRASA and the government for like 7 years down there with Rosello's father when he was governor. There's a lot of problems, and I have friends working on it down there. It's very difficult. It's hard to get things in there. PREPA is a very much, it's who you know to get a job there. Same thing with PRASA for basically. But also it's very difficult. So they're taking you have to boat things in, and they're flying in some things. I was very disappointed that it took a week to get that darn act thing about who can take, you know, what boats go in there. They have to be U.S. boats, because it took for Texas and Florida like a day It should be routine. So my personal feeling is the administration wasn't treating Puerto Rico fairly because they don't have voting representatives or senators. I think the mayor of San Juan has been very outspoken. I give her credit for that, and the governor, I think, has been doing as well as he can. It's a very difficult issue. They really need the outside help. Was involved with a lot of like Sandy and all that kind of stuff, and it's very difficult to bring people back. Puerto Rico's a lot of people are like leaving. They're coming with their family in Florida.
Yeah, my
or New
family
York.
are here. Some of
Yeah, or New York or New Jersey. They're just coming in by droves. I was just in touch with somebody last night during the election stuff from Puerto Rico. Who's a friend. We talked, and it's really heartbreaking because it's a wonderful population. The schools are very good. The University of Puerto Rico is a great university. And people are trying to work when their family doesn't have electricity. San Juan is doing okay in most of San Juan, but in the east, the south, the west, it's just horrible. And that a lot of people still don't have water after it's been all this time now. It's just an embarrassment because they're Americans and they're not being, in my personal opinion, treated fairly. There are a lot of efforts. I know New Jersey and New York have a lot of Puerto Rican populations, a lot of money being raised and containers being shipped down there by people of all kinds of equipment and water and food and everything, and then it has to be dispersed. FEMA, to give them some credit, has actually been doing pretty well with Texas and Florida, and they were stretched thin when Puerto Rico happened. What's amazing to me is this is the first category, twice we've had category 5s down there, which we've never had before, and it's because of climate change, the intensity of the heat of the ocean, because everything's getting warmer, and it's going to get worse. So the good thing about it is when they rebuild, there will be rebuild stronger. Florida understands that. The Florida Power Company understands that. It's a much better system. When the building codes will probably be a heck of a lot stronger. So in the future for Puerto Rico, I think it will be better because it built a better, stronger system. But I'll tell you, the next couple of years are going to be hell. And my heart breaks for them, and they need all the help they can get. I mean, there's definitely organizations you can volunteer to work with for that if you want to go home, but take a lot of water with you.
I just wanted to add to that. There's a group called Empowered by Light that I'm on the board of. It's a solar nonprofit. And so Empowered by Light has gone down to, in collaboration with a solar company, and have installed very quickly, they deployed in like a week, deployed solar microgrids at the police stations. And so the police stations were not able to function at all to do emergency response. So Empowered by Light was instrumental in sort of putting together the teams to fly the equipment down. They were running circles around the other folks who were already on the ground, got them installed in a week, ready to go. And so those fire stations are now the sort of hub for communications, for cell phone charging, for all of that. And I think there's 5 police stations, and now we just got another grant from the Kresge Foundation to continue to go work down in Puerto Rico. So I think, yeah, the public sector is great, but I think if there are more nimble and quick ways to get things out there, that it should be done and and sort of celebrated as a solution, because I think there's a lot of different ways that people can come into play, but it was something which has just recently been done in the last, 4 weeks ago or something.
Yeah, a lot of private organizations of which either because they care about Puerto Rico or because they're Puerto Rican have been doing a lot of work. What's good about this for the future, not just Puerto Rico, but all the island nations in the world, because this is going to be getting bad everywhere on a continual basis because of climate change, is Puerto Rico is American. So they will have a little bit better resources than other places. They will put microgrids in. After Sandy, we're doing microgrids in New York and New Jersey. It's a major thing for the next administration in New Jersey. But the Christie administration has put them in specifically for using Sandy money, specifically for the police, fire, and then a place that's either a school or some kind of a college dormitory where people could go to, community centers to charge phones or whatever it is. Those microgrids will be all over the state. Christie has started that. That's going to happen in Puerto Rico, and it's going to happen in other places where you have wind. Obviously, Puerto Rico can be very windy. Where you have solar, and you do the microgrid, so at least you have critical services when this happens, and it will happen again, hopefully not for a number of years in Puerto Rico. But that's what the whole Caribbean nations will be able to learn from, because Puerto Rico is involved very much so, has been for years in the Caribbean nations projects, but also the over in Asia too, in those island nations.
Thank you.
All right, yeah. Yes, and I want to add.
So I think Puerto Rico is unfortunate, and they're going to have accelerated rebuilding, and it'll be tough for next few years. But as kind of alluded here is that infrastructure issue in the United States, because if you look at many of the countries, particularly the United States, we are very, very old infrastructure. Some people joke that our electricity line is the best in the world because it never got bombed. Means a rhetorical question. So ours is the oldest because we never needed to rebuild. Means that we are stuck with 100-year-old infrastructure, which you don't know when it's gonna collapse. So people are estimating even water lines. In order to replace and redo the whole water line in the United States, it will be $1.8 trillion. That's just one type of infrastructure. There are layers and layers and of those. So in your generation as engineers or even non-engineers in similar field, you have to think about, okay, if we have to build infrastructure for next 100 years again, are we going to rebuild the ones we built 100 years ago, or are we going to have redo something much different technology? So a lot of discussions are in academia and industry as well, and there's a discussion on microgrid versus the regular grid or even supergrid. So I think this is an interesting and important time for us to rebuild our infrastructure, which will be a big part of your life.
I would echo also what it was told by three ladies, but also when this kind of emergency situation arises, also a lot of opportunistic people do appear. And decision makers also should really make sure that short-term, mid-term, and long-term decisions are so important for, especially for infrastructure development, but also finding solutions to energy and waste matters. So that is why I believe Puerto Ricans should really encourage decision makers that they should not be either slow or rush into decisions, because money will be available, but money should be spent in a very efficient way. And so it's really important. And tested technologies, yes, emerging technologies. However, you know, credible people should be helping Puerto Ricans.
I don't want to take time from students if there are students with questions, but okay.
That was nice of her.
Hi, my name is Nasir Ismail. I'm a cell bio neuroscience major and a sophomore here at Rutgers. A couple years ago, I read this article about this element called thorium, and what like the direction of the article was, I guess, was talking about these liquid fluoride thorium reactors that not only don't produce carbon emissions, but it costs around 50 cents less per kilowatt hour than coal, and it's cheaper than natural gas, and the processes to, I guess, extract it. So I guess what my question is where do you see the future of clean energy technology going? That wasn't phrased very well, but yeah, that's the...
I'll just answer quickly from my developing country perspective. And what I always see is lots of people with the latest, greatest gadget that they think a developing country needs. So it will be something like that. And it'll have, you know, be in a very early stage or be very expensive, like hydrogen and all these other things. And for us, for the developing countries, you know, we're looking at basic energy for 1 billion people. And that basic energy at this point doesn't require a lot of innovation. It requires distribution channels, financing, markets, financing for the customers to be able to afford it. And for us, we always sort of think about what's the most practical option, because there's plenty of technology that's out there ready to be deployed, but all of that other market infrastructure is missing, or policy infrastructure is missing. Right. And so for us, working in developing countries, we don't necessarily need the thing that's going to take us to the moon. We need basic energy to help really alleviate the lives of poverty. People are living in poverty with absolutely no electricity. And so for that context, we're sort of looking at more incremental changes using the awesome technologies that are available now. I mean, solar is at its cheapest ever, but how do you get it into a country who has import duties on solar, making it totally unaffordable? So that kind of ridiculous situation exists. The technology is there, it's ready to go. So I'm not going to speak about the thorium, but I'm just going to say there's so much out there already that requires all these other things to get it deployed and really working for people. But you're probably the best for.
If I may, okay, yes, for energy, I would say that not only carbon footprint for future energy, also we have to take a look at energy sources should have less water footprint. That's the important message that I'd like to, as a take-home, message to you. Because neither fossil fuels, also nuclear. Look into fossil fuels with water cooling, and also nuclear, because people look into nuclear fuels like, oh, it's no carbon, less carbon emissions, but they have big water footprint too. Right. So that is why for future, and the energy sources, solar, wind, and also integrating waste into energy problem solving is the important field. Obviously emerging some new technologies like hydrogen technology and low carbon electricity is important, but any energy should have also less water footprint in addition to carbon footprint.
Thorium is actually, it's already a liquid, so it doesn't need to be cooled. So
Yeah.
the reactors don't need cooling. But I guess I see what you mean.
No, I don't usually work on.
All of the above.
I guess I don't really work on the thorium area or those energy, so I don't think I want to comment on that without doing research. But clean energy or renewable energy for the future, it would be great if we are there today, right? I can always find more interesting thing to work on other than carbon footprint, no problem. But the problem is it will take a lot longer than we think. The problem is that intermittency of renewable energy, that if you have a huge amount of electrons, unless you can store them, it's very, very hard. In the United States, including all the battery you have, if you store energy in batteries, you can keep maybe 11 minutes, right, of the energy use in the United States. So our capacity of the energy storage is a lot less than how much we can generate renewable energy. So there's a lot of research has to go in. In your generation, can you be totally fossil free? Hard to tell. There are areas it would be very difficult to decarbonize. The power sector, hopefully soon. Transportation sector will be difficult, but hopefully we'll get there. But there are chemical sectors also emit a lot of emissions. So if you really want to decarbonize the energy, not only associated with your powering electricity, but other things, it's a long way to go. And one of the biggest challenges will be storing energy in some form. It doesn't need to be only battery. There are other forms as well.
I could literally talk about this for hours.
Yeah.
So I will try to cut it really short. I've been in this area for my whole career, and energy storage is the thing. But for instance, offshore wind, New Jersey literally is the hub of offshore wind on the eastern seaboard. Atlantic City, Brigantine is the windiest place in the country. The Department of Energy, when they've done the offshore wind things, I mean, offshore wind in New Jersey will be base load generation, replacing gas plants probably in 25 years. It will cost more, but the costs have come down dramatically in Europe. The European countries and companies are now building here with smarter policy people in the government and people who are Americans who deal with the government, and we're very strange to deal with. That's going to be happening. And so we need to get our act together on the policy stuff where the PJM, the grid system, which is probably the best operated in the world, it's huge. About 17 states are part of it. From Virginia to New York, northern New Jersey, should be a baseline, a transmission line. Google and some people have proposed it for the last 12, 15 years. Should be done. Offshore wind, the turbines are much bigger now in Europe, much higher. It's really windy up there, and there's very few birds 18 to 20 miles out. I think that really is a big part of our future. You could have power buoys, wave action electricity in between that. Solar energy storage is a thing for wind, but high wind out 20 miles will be fairly consistent. Solar, you need the storage. Thank God for Tesla. They're working hard on this, but also for these microgrids and things. If you have solar and you have a smart inverter, I have solar at my house in New Brunswick and my house down the shore. When the rules now are, if the grid is off, the distribution line is off, that has to be off. But it can very easily have a smart inverter where there's two-way communication with the smart meters and stuff, where the utility knows what's on and off. So I can, a day after Sandy, have electricity for my solar. I don't have storage. However, New Jersey Natural Gas's affiliate company, who is not utility, is going to be doing a pilot soon where people who have solar that their affiliate does will also have storage to pilot that. I really think in 10 years, people in New Jersey and New York who experience Sandy, who have solar now, will want that. In about 10 years' time, we'll be able to have that. Right now, it'll be a 4 to 6 hour battery. But if you have solar in the day after Sandy, it's really sunny, you can store it, at least have it much more, keep your refrigerator going, etc. I'm really very hopeful that by 2050, there will probably not be a need for any more nuclear power, which is clean energy at the front of it and during operations, but certainly you got a real problem with the waste and what we're going to be doing with that waste located at 102, 104 sites around the country. I think Yucca Mountain will be open again, it'll go there. But anyway, I think renewables are here by 2050.
One more sentence, in current and future energy policies, should also include energy efficiency, improved energy efficiency, because unused megawatts are the cleanest megawatts. Negawatts, let's call them negawatts, okay? So keep in mind, and while you're leaving the room, even turn the lights off.
The building codes have to be much stronger than they are now. And then we have to also do energy upgrades in low income especially, and the old homes that don't have insulation that were built before like 1970.
Thank you so much.
More than he asked for.
Hi, my name is Mugdha Parlikar. I'm a freshman here at Rutgers. And my question is, what are your opinions on how to popularize sustainable technologies through the private sector?
Well, the federal government used to give money for that, and it does it now. When I was the Utility Commission in New Jersey from 2002 to 10 as the head of the agency, we actually gave money from Clean Energy Fund money, which is from ratepayers, for clean energy technology. Not quite startups, but more than bench, but it was like going next level. So there, Petra, which, you know, the solar and the poles that you see? That was created in a guy's garage, and then he had a big business going, and public service put out a bid, and that's all PSE&G. Smart inverters in there, they can tell what's going on. There's an energy storage company called EOS that's at Meriton Center, very much into energy storage, cutting edge. We gave them startup money. If you've been to Atlantic City, the 5 wind turbines at Atlantic City County Utility Authority, startup money from us. They wouldn't have been there but for that. Princeton Power, that does smart inverters and other things. Students at Princeton started this. We gave them money for that. They're still going. So government has a role in that, and the national labs that you've heard about are doing great research out in Colorado, the Renewable Energy Lab and other places. The problem is the federal government is stopping funding that and is shutting down some of these labs. There are private companies and private businesses and entrepreneurs who are putting money into these technologies. But it really should be more government funding. Academics have a lot of technologies that are being worked on at Rutgers, Carnegie Mellon, Harvard, MIT, out in California, but they need grant money, and the federal government, unfortunately, is cutting down on that.
If I may add, the center that I manage, it's Rutgers University's Clean Energy Center. Also, it's a business incubator. What we do, we house 12 companies, and most of them are working on clean technologies, clean energy technologies. Who are they? Young companies that they're trying, you can invent something in a small scale, but you should be able to scale it up. Your technology should make sense at a bench scale, but you should be able to, when you scale it up, you have to deliver the same results before you even commercialize. So as Jeanne mentioned, you need funding. So that is why we provide much lower cost lab space. We provide business support. We are announcing an accelerator. So we are trying to help those young companies. So that is why, and also I encourage everyone, every day you just create ideas. Find, young people especially, you have to create ideas. And so the most important muscle we have to exercise is brain. So for millennials especially, if you don't have ideas, so you are sort of in trouble. So you have to find, next morning get up and delete some of the ideas, create more ideas. So, and then create, solutions in the life. I'm sorry. Sorry about that.
Well, I want to say something that's relevant to the whole group, not on a specific question.
All right. Yeah. Let these two ask the questions because we want to leave time for people to have a little bite to eat, and so we're gonna let these guys ask questions. You guys can kind of answer them both as you see fit, and then anybody who has something to say to the whole group.
My name is Marianne Wassel. I'm a PhD student in material science. I'm also the president of SWE Grad, that's the Society of Women Engineers. So if any of you want to join the group, we'll take engineers, we'll take non-engineers, we'll take women, we'll take everyone else but women. So if you want to join, you can come see me later. I've got business cards and all that. But my question is mostly for Alissa, but everybody can answer. So I used to be a community college professor, but now I'm going back for my PhD. I was the first female engineering professor at the County College of Morris. And so in the wake of a traumatic event or a psychological traumatic event, for me, the work wasn't sustainable enough for me to continue with my position there. So my question for you is, in experiencing any sort of sexist behavior or what have you, what sustains you? And what kind of, what keeps you going?
My name's Ashley Pennington. I'm a PhD candidate in the Chemical Biological Engineering department. And my question was kind of on the leadership side of in energy. So you guys have spoken on how you've gotten mentored and how you've gotten through, and I wanted to see a little bit about the other side. How have you mentored, and what has that meant to you in terms of your career?
So,
go down and you can answer this.
okay. So that's an excellent question, which is what I wanted to mention to everybody is I'm part of a group called the Clean Energy Education and Empowerment Initiative, which has the acronym C3E. And it was started by Ernie Muniz, who used to be the U.S. Department of Energy's Secretary of Energy when he was at MIT. And then when he went to Department of Energy, it then was part of Department of Energy. And now it's still part of MIT and Stanford University and now Columbia University. So the C3E is all about trying to close the gender gap working in clean energy. And so there are a cadre of more senior women who have come before you. And those senior women are ambassadors for C3E, so I'm one of those. And then there are young people, students, people in the early part of their career, mid-career women. And so what C3E does, one thing it does is it has an awards program every year in 10 different categories, so research, international, entrepreneurship, business, etc. So it has this amazing awards program for people working at different parts in the energy sector. It also has mentoring that it does. It also does meetups. So I'm based here in the New York area, so some of the meetups will be in the New York area, but there's people in California, Oregon, all sorts of places. Colorado is another one. So it's really very focused on the clean energy sector. It's focused on women's empowerment. It's focused on seasoned veterans linking up with younger sort of rising stars and trying to really help people sort of know what clean energy fields are about, mentor them. And so you should look it up. And they're having their annual conference next week at MIT. So they have a bunch of students who come from all over the place, go there, and there's also going to be all the ambassadors. And so it's a really great program. So if anyone's interested in C3E, just get in touch with me and I can certainly connect you. I'm just going to say one more thing for Alissa, because one of the things they do is for mid-career awesome people like you who have 10 or more years experience, they have awards. So there's a whole competitive process for the awards, and then you get.
You need to deal with this issue, and there are people here at Rutgers that can help you how to deal with it, and I am totally outraged that this happened at one of our county colleges. This is an issue that really pisses me off, that it happens now in New Jersey at a state college. So if you want to talk to me afterwards, we can talk, but you need to get help. Rutgers has people here to help. They have a great center that's been here for a long time. And so I'll talk to you afterwards about that. And thank you for doing what you're doing, but don't let him get away with it. I assume it's a guy. On the mentoring thing, that's what I do. I've been married 38 years. I don't have kids. But I've been mentoring some young men, but a lot of women and not so young women for the last 30 or 40 years. That's part of the purpose of we need to give back, right? So I've been doing that a lot in groups, but also with individuals for a long, long time. I think everybody needs to do that. I didn't have that mentor except for Ed Blaustein, but I had my younger brother, so it's almost the same thing.
I guess we can go on and for a long time about this. Yeah, I guess it was hard road. Columbia is a very demanding place, and not everybody gets tenure. Tenure rate is not that high, so you can imagine that it's a very, very stressful place. But I think I've been very lucky. I found my passion very early in my career, and it will be very stressful days, right? And then I will be crushed left and right. Because being a faculty is always getting rejections. Your proposal gets rejected, your papers get rejected, these things happen. Of course, you have a lot of successes too, but at the same time, people who become faculty are not familiar with failures. So it's like, what is this, right? I don't get this anymore. So, but I remember still, even today, when I have a good night's sleep and on the way to work, I walk to work about 20 minutes. I just can't believe I get paid to do this. I think there's a lot more pros than cons, so that sustains me. But at the same time, that's not an easy thing to swallow for a person who's drowning, right? So my mentorship, I have to do a lot of big mentoring like this or other things, and I'm the director of the very few female director of the energy centers or institutes in the country. So I do as much as possible, a lot more traveling, and I do a lot more services for the department or professional societies, because I hate to say it, token women a lot of times, right? These things happen, and that adds to your stress as well. What I usually do is I really one-on-one mentoring, because the cases are so different. You will feel exactly differently about certain situations, and I like to be a lot more systematic and detailed mentoring, because what we don't do well, one of the things as a female, is the sharing notes. Because you think that you need to prove yourself on your own. Men don't. They really use network. They ask questions. They get the tips, and they get the, maybe proposals they submitted before. I get many emails on, oh, can you share your NSF Career Award proposal from male, but not from female. So I think there are things about you seeking resources and finding good mentor, and then you cannot make that person to be your mentor, but you want them to volunteer to be your mentor. And learning that process is very important.
Well, currently I am part of 20 university consortium on bioeconomy and bioenergy education consortium. So every university has one person as mentor, and also we choose one mentee student. And I chose a student that she was my intern all summer, last summer, on bioenergy development. And so interesting, and one-on-one mentoring in addition to having interns in your group, but one-on-one dealing with teaching to students is interesting, and so it's a great experience. And because she will be organizing some bioenergy events in the university and trying to educate her peers, and so we'll see. And so it's a great. I recommend everyone at every level to do this mentor-mentee relationship. Sorry.
One quick last thing is that I tell this is a kind of common thing I tell all my students is that if you ask your professor, how can I get an A in this class? I'll tell you, right? But if you ask a professor that, oh, I want to be a professor one day and I don't know how I can be a high impact person in that, what kind of thought process I need to go through, then I'll say, can I get back to you on this? Because now you made me think about you a lot bigger setting, right? And then I have to sit back. So as a person, I know you. Okay, what kind of advice can I give? I think it's really up to you how much resources you use by stretching other people on what you're looking for. So ask questions not on next semester, but more deeper and longer. And you do need to do soul searching. Then there'll be a lot of help coming along your way.
Well, thank you. Let's give our speakers. I have a couple words to say. But
I have a commercial, real fast.
Have to get a word in.
This is at the Center for American Women in Politics at Eagleton Institute at Rutgers. They have on their website the New Jersey Bipartisan Coalition for Women's Appointments for an incoming governor. Full-time jobs, but also boards and commissions are appointed. You go on there, there's an online biographical form you fill out, that kind of thing, and you can send it in. That's for really for jobs. But for the board, and they'll also talk about boards and commissions, but for boards and commissions, if you're interested in being appointed to a state board or commission that is not a full-time job, and most of these are unpaid, some of them are paid. On Saturday, December 9th, over at the Douglas College Student Center, in the morning, 8:30 to noon, there will be a bunch of us talking about how to get appointed to a state board or commission. So that's Saturday, and that will also be listed on the Center for American Women in Politics. The Women's Political Caucus and Bipartisan Coalition for Women's Appointments are doing that. So that's Saturday, the 9th, at the Douglas Student Center in the morning.
All right. Well, as I mentioned, the full video recording of this event will be available on the CJEP website in a few days. You can also subscribe to their podcast series on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and lots of other platforms. This is a number of great events that CJEP is putting on. And tomorrow, November 9th, they have an event called We're Next on Climate, U.S.-China Energy and Climate Collaboration in the Xi Trump era. And this is at Columbia University School of International and Public Affairs, 9:30 to 11 in the morning. I'd go to it if I didn't have to teach. They're having a number of great speakers. And then here at Rutgers, the Energy Institute is having our energy policy seminars. They're at the Marine and Coastal Sciences Lampi Room at 10:45, and November 17th, we host Carl Husker, who's the Senior Fellow on Climate Change program at the World Resources Institute, and he'll be talking about a deeper look at decarbonization, not decarbonization. And also there's a STEM Community Outreach Symposium organized by graduate students here at Rutgers, Friday, November 10th, 10 to 2:30 at the Life Science Atrium on Bush campus. So I thank you all for your time. Please get up and enjoy the food, and talk to each other and talk to our speakers. And thank you for attending this really great inaugural event.